you can see very clearly, very vividly, America's double standards when it comes to free speech. When you compare America's position with regards to those who are demanding an independent state called Khalistan for Sikhs in India, and for those who are supporting Palestinian rights and calling for a Palestinian state in the Middle East, a two-state solution that exists side by side with Israel. So you can see how one demand is defended by the US establishment as free speech, and how the other demand is being suppressed, demonized, delegitimized as hate speech. Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about a very troubling issue. It appears that in the pursuit of defending US policy towards Israel, and especially to control the narrative about what is happening in the Middle East, about the attacks, the terrorist attacks by Hamas on October 7th, and the subsequent response of Israel, which, according to most accounts, is genocidal, brutal, and hugely disproportionate, committing huge amounts of crimes against humanity. But to control that particular narrative as to how the world sees the whole thing, especially American voters and in America, so that aid towards Israel, a huge amount of aid towards Israel, and a completely uncritical policy towards Israel can be sustained. In order to control a narrative that can achieve that, an uncritical policy towards Israel, unlimited amount of American weapons and dollars going to Israel, and no accountability of Israel for what it does. To control that particular narrative, it appears that US government, the Congress, as well as the White House are essentially trying to eliminate the First Amendment in the United States and control speech, and also essentially targeting the academic freedom of universities and trying to essentially kill all dissent towards US policy in the Middle East or any criticism of Israel. Now, this is very scary because America, as a democracy, as a secular democracy, all of that really hinges on the First Amendment. And if the First Amendment is deleted, this country will not be a democracy, will not be a secular state, I guarantee you that. And so it is, I think, in the interest of all Americans to be worried about the moves that the American elite, both the Republicans and the Democrats, in combination with American billionaires who support Israel, are taking. So, and you can see this contrast. You can see this contrast when you compare America's policy with regard to those who want a Khalistan state in India, the Sikhs who are demanding an independent Khalistan state in India, and the Palestinian supporters who are demanding a Palestinian state in the Middle East, the call for a two-state solution, the call for freedom in Gaza and West Bank. You can see the difference. You can see very clearly, very vividly, America's double standards when it comes to free speech. When you compare America's position with regards to those who are demanding an independent state called Khalistan for Sikhs in India, and for those who are supporting Palestinian rights and calling for a Palestinian state in the Middle East, a two-state solution that exists side by side with Israel. So you can see how one demand is defended by the US establishment as free speech, and how the other demand is being suppressed, demonized, delegitimized as hate speech. That's what today's conversation is all about. Please subscribe to Khanversations, press the bell icon, like this video, and share it with people. So those of you who are familiar with the Khalistan issue, Khalistan, one of India's religious minorities, Sikhs, who are primarily concentrated in the state of Punjab in the 1980s, demanded a separate homeland for the Sikhs. They wanted it Khalistan, it means essentially a pure state. And there was an uprising, and it was suppressed by India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, for which she gave up her life. She was then assassinated by her own bodyguards, who were Sikhs. And there was a lot of violence in the city, which was not controlled by the government at that time against the Sikhs. So there's a lot of anger and frustration and pain in the Sikh community. So in the past few years, there has emerged in the Sikh diaspora a call again to revive the call for Khalistan and create a Khalistan state, a separatist, segregationist movement that has started. It is primarily based in Canada, but also exists in the United States as well as United Kingdom and Australia. And in the last couple of years, these movements have started conducting a worldwide referendum asking the Sikh diaspora, the Punjab diaspora, to vote in a referendum to make Khalistan an independent state. The Indian government, needless to say, is very upset about what is going on and is trying to work with its partners, the governments, and saying that please do not encourage, because these people have also indulged in terrorist activities in Punjab, in India. They have been labeled officially by India as terrorists. So India sees this as the West supporting terrorist activities in India, extremism and secessionism in India. The US and Canada and Britain and Australia have allowed these separatist movements to essentially thrive on the grounds that it is free speech. Every time India complains about this, the US responds by saying, we are a democracy, we believe in free speech. So even though these people might be saying things which are hateful and dangerous, even calling for segregation, trying to create an insurgency in India, we cannot shut them down because of free speech. In fact, one of the leaders, Panno, who lives in the United States, has not only just called for creating an independence, but he's advocated violence. He's talked about attacking the Indian Parliament. He's talked about blowing up Air India planes, referring to a particular Air India flight that was essentially blown up in the late 80s. And he has also basically used language. If any Palestinian had used the same language in the US, Palestinian American, they would have been labeled a terrorist and put away on the basis of the Patriot Act. So it is very interesting, while the American government and the American foreign policy establishment calls India and US-India relations as the most consequential relations of this century. These are the words of Biden and Blinken, that India and US relations are the most consequential relations of this century. In spite of that, India does not get the first-class treatment that Israel is getting. For Israel, we will suspend the cardinal, the constitutive element of our democracy and our freedom, which is the First Amendment. But for India, we will not. So Indians should recognize that they're getting a second-class treatment from this administration. But so some of you might wonder, what do I mean by suppression of the First Amendment? Let me just give you a few examples which have happened just in the past few days. It is called the Palestine exception, basically. So, for example, the House, the bill hasn't passed, but the House, with a significant majority, passed a bill called 6090, HR 6090. What this bill does is empower the education department to punish any university, any academic institution in the United States which gets government funding if it does not use a particular definition of anti-Semitism as hate speech. And this particular definition of anti-Semitism basically equates any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism. So if you criticize Israel and say Israel is occupying the West Bank and is committing a genocidal war in Gaza, killing 34,000 civilians, nearly 13,000 of them children, 13,000 of them children. If you say this, this will be seen as anti-Semitic because it is critical of Israel. You have to say, oh my God, Israel is such a wonderful country. It is protecting itself. It's just defending itself. And the real blame is Hamas, and Hamas is hiding behind its children. And even though we are throwing 2,000-pound bombs at them, the bombs are only killing the children and not the Hamas fighters. And whatever the rubbish to justify these policies. That's all academics are supposed to say. That's all the students are supposed to say. If they deviate from that, they will be labeled anti-Semitic. It will be a hate crime. The universities will lose funding, and it's quite possible the professors will lose their jobs, and students will be suspended and expelled from the universities. This is to create a fear among the population. Do not dare to criticize Israel. If you do, we will label you as an anti-Semite, and that will be the end of your career and your life. They want to put the fear. My God, this is like living in the Soviet Union or even China if you are an Uyghur. So that is what this HR 6090 does. There is a lot of support for it in the Senate. It has not yet passed, but I can tell you our president would love to say I'm a Zionist, will probably sign the bill as soon as the Senate passes this bill. So this is one instance of a clear violation. Remember, I'm not even going to go into the content of the speech. Even if it is hate speech, it is protected speech. The freedom of speech, the First Amendment does not say you have to only have eulogies or songs or friendly speech. The reason why you have a First Amendment is because it protects critical speech, even if it is obnoxious. So this argument that we will suppress speech at least contradicts the First Amendment, is against the American conception of freedom of speech and American conception of democracy. Because if that's not the case, then we should also ban all speech that criticizes Islam and insults Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. All the cartoons that Europeans are publishing, that would also be hate speech and should be banned all over the world. And any criticism of any Muslim country for that matter, whether it's Saudi Arabia or Iran or Pakistan, no matter what they do, should be labeled as Islamophobic and should be treated on the same level as you would treat any anti-Semitic speech if you want to be equal. But that's not the case. You can criticize Hindu nationalism, you can criticize Islamism, but you cannot criticize Zionism because that becomes anti-Semitism. On this bill, HR 6090, Nadler, the longest serving Jewish representative in the Congress, had this to say. Listen to this. This is a Jewish member of the US Congress who is also, in his own words, a Zionist, like President Biden. This is what he has to say about the bill and why he voted against it. Can you imagine this? That one of the most prominent Jewish leaders in the country from New York in the Congress for the longest time as a Jewish representative in the Congress had this to say.
I devoted much of my life to combating anti-Semitism, and I am as attuned as anyone to threats and bigotry aimed at Jewish people. I will take lectures from no one about the need for vigorous efforts to fight anti-Semitism on campus or anywhere else. I am also a deeply committed Zionist who firmly believes in Israel's right to exist as a homeland for the Jewish people. But as someone who is also a longtime champion of protecting freedom of speech, I must oppose this misguided bill.
The second example that you can see is the recent efforts to ban TikTok, again passed the House and the Senate, and the President has already signed it, but it has a few months, and they're going to go to court, and we'll see what the judges do. But in a very interesting dialogue at the John McCain Institute in Arizona, Biden and Senator Mitt Romney from Utah were having a conversation about it, and it was very clear from the conversation, if you listen to it, please go and do this. Blinken and Mitt Romney at McCain Institute. So if you see the dialogue, it's very clear that TikTok is being banned because the State Department and the US government is unable to control the narrative about Israel. And so things that are hidden on Facebook and Twitter and X, etc., are now being shown on TikTok. And they talk about the Osama bin Laden letter going viral. So what? Isn't that free speech? They're saying that China and Iran are using TikTok. I don't know how Iran is using it, but are using TikTok to manipulate American opinion. And therefore, all these students and all the professors at the universities all have become anti-Israel only because of TikTok. So once we ban TikTok, I guess we'll all become pro-Israel. Anyway, so that is one reason why TikTok is being banned. I think all the talk about security and data about American citizens is rubbish, because as I told you in the past, that data that TikTok collects is also collected by other social media companies and is available on the market. So if China wants the data, they can simply buy it. The third and more interesting thing is about these US senators. US senators are threatening the International Criminal Court, ICC, and the family of the members of people, the staff of ICC, if they issue a warrant for arrest for Netanyahu. It's amazing. I mean, this would be, in American parlance, this would be obstruction of justice, which is a crime in the United States. Can you imagine threatening judges and threatening courts that if you issue an arrest warrant, if you make a case against our favorite person of the century, Netanyahu, then we will impose sanctions on you. It's amazing. You should see the threatening letter that US senators have sent. They have absolutely no regard for democracy, freedom of speech, rule of law, rule-based system. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how other diplomats in other countries don't fall off their chairs laughing when Blinken says we believe in a rule-based order and we want to promote a rule-based order. No, you don't. You're destroying the very institutions which exist to support a rule-based order. It is a shame. The United States defense of Israel is making the United States an illiberal state. Let me say that again. The US defense of Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories and its policies is making America an illiberal state. The United States, and here's a fourth case about how the United States is trying to suppress speech or make it redundant. They try to portray a UN Security Council resolution as non-binding for the first time. Since when have UN Security Council resolutions become binding? They're one of the major sources of international law. If this resolution, with the only resolution that the US allowed to be passed against Israel, because it was trying to use that as a bargaining chip between Biden and Netanyahu, if that is non-binding, then why are other resolutions against Russia and Iran and other countries also non-binding? Double standards. An interesting thing is also this subverting the Leahy law. There's a particular law that's been there on the books for a long time. It says that America should not sell weapons to military units or military institutions which have committed human rights violations, gross human rights violations. Right now, there are memos apparently that the State Department has done on the basis of the Leahy law and sent it up to Blinken to essentially apply the Leahy law to 3 Israeli units in the West Bank, not in Gaza, in the West Bank, that have clearly violated human rights and US regulations. They've done some very cruel things. You can read about it. I don't even want to repeat it here. But Blinken is just sitting on it and not acting upon it. He's subverting US law to protect Israeli abuse of human rights and Israeli soldiers. This is unbelievable, ridiculous how the US government is basically deploying every asset that it has, everything that it can potentially do to anybody and everybody, undermining its own citizens, destroying the future of American universities. These are the core of American power, American civilization, all to protect a genocidal war in Gaza. It's absolutely stunning. I have never in my life witnessed such a strange policy. You talk about human rights in one way, and then you provide the weapons and the bombs and the legal protection for systematic violation of the same very. Israel is starving Palestinians. That is a war crime. Listen to the speeches that Blinken gave about Russia's use of food as a weapon. And just replace Russia with Israel, and you will see what I mean by double standards. India is being accused of bad behavior. They're not using the word rogue, but they'll soon start using the word rogue because of its reaction to the Khalistani movement in the US and Canada and elsewhere. But the US government itself is undermining free speech at home and threatening International Criminal Court. This is the US Senate which is threatening International Criminal Court. How is that different? Threatening not only them, but also their family members with sanctions and other punitive measures. So I'm very disappointed. I mean, for decades, for most of my academic life, I've promoted democracy, tried to make the case that the Muslim world should become more democratic because democratic governance is one of the best ways of protecting human rights and giving equal opportunity, political and economic, to all citizens of the country. But I'm just stunned by the way these two democracies, the United States and Israel, have been operating in the past few months. I have lost faith in democracy. I'm sorry to say that. I have lost faith in democracy. If America can do this, then why promote this system? It is oppressive. It is systematically preventing Palestinians or those who support Palestinian human rights even acting peacefully. You cannot boycott Israel. There will be punitive action from the state. You cannot criticize Israel. It will be considered anti-Semitic. It is absolutely stunning as to how the United States is undermining the most important principle of freedom, which is free speech, in order to defend Israeli policies in the Middle East. I hope you found this conversation interesting and persuasive. If so, please subscribe to Khanversations, press the bell icon, like this video, and share it with people. And in case when you come back next time and you find, God forbid, that this channel does not exist because it has been banned or it has been deleted for some reason, I don't know, they may just find that I have misspelled something and then construe that as something I shouldn't have done and banned it, then please go ahead and search for me. I will restart the whole process. I will restart conversation. Yes, I will lose all the hundreds of videos I've already done, and I might also lose most of the subscribers, but I hope you will come back and find me in case the channel disappears. So until next time, I'm your host Muqtedar Khan. Take care, be brave, fight for your rights wherever you are. Take care.